Okay, welcome to the presentation. This one is more relationships in reading, chapter 7. So I just made a video about chapter 5 where we talked about addition and time. In this chapter we're going to talk about illustration, which is our exemplification, and compare and contrast and cause and effect. The next chapter we start in class will be compare and contrast. So let's go. So if you take a second and look at these illustrations, A and B, which one flows better? Which one's easier to understand? If you chose B, you're correct because they added the words for instance. And again, this is for exemplification, for instance, for example, and other words to illustrate. So here it just flows better. In A, there was no transition words that would help us. And here again, for instance, is an illustration word. It's an exemplification word. You guys should be familiar with that already. And here are some of the illustration or exemplification words you use in your essays, including to be specific, to illustrate, okay, and then here they are used in context. And one way that we use the illustration is in a definition. So you'll give the definition and then you'll give examples to support what that definition is. Are you adding more to it to make it proof that it's really like sharecropping, for example, is blah, blah, blah. And then you want to give definitions of how it occurs. So take a look and read A, B, and C. You're going to put it in order and look for the transition words. They should help you. Pause if you need to. And this is the way it came out. So here they're giving the definition of apathy. And then they're saying example 1, for instance, example 2, another example. So here they gave the definition, example, and example. And this flows pretty well because of these words, the transition words. So here's a paragraph about acrophobia. So read it, and then they're going to ask you questions about what is the topic and how many examples were given. So pause it, read it, look it over, and then go to the next. So here, what word is being defined? Acrophobia. They give the definition of it. Okay, and which sentence contains the definition? Very good. And excuse me, sorry about my dogs. So here they're giving the definition of it. And then here, which sentence explains more about the word? People with acrophobia, blah, blah, blah. And then here they're giving an example of it. And they use for instance to start it in sentence 3. So they give the example of it, and then the rest of the paragraph is examples of how she suffers or what she goes through with acrophobia. Next, let's talk about compare and contrast. Here, which item is easier to understand, A or B? Again, pause if you need to. So here, there is no transition word. And if we take a look at the next one, similarly, not only does this help cold set together sentence 1 and 2, but it also lets the reader know, they're going to compare these two things. If it were a contrast, they would say conversely or on the other hand. Here are some words to use if you're going to write a comparison paragraph or essay. So just like, as they do here, similarly, as they do here, and then all of these other words you can use. These show comparison, things that are similar. Here, we're going to jump from comparison over to contrast. So A and B, if you take a look, which one is easier to understand? And then let's go down. The first item, again, there is no transition word. The second one is even though, although. These show contrast. So we know that this is going to contrast. Even though a roller coaster scares many people, they love riding on it. So it's contrast. They're afraid, but they ride it. And contrast words show difference, which we know. And here's a list of them. You guys use but a lot, however, although On the other hand, and not in the other hand. Good. Difference, unlike, while, rather than. So all of these are contrasting words. So if you're going to write in the compare and contrast pattern, there are three ways. One, you can do all comparison. A is like B, or you can do all contrast in the essay, and this would be the thesis. A is different from. However, at times you may want to compare and contrast. So you would have both in your thesis. Let your readers know. And a good way to do that, which I'll show you in class, is although blah 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 common, they do have certain similarities. So although would set up the contrast, and then similarities would set up the compare. But we'll go over that more in class. If you take a look at the next slide and put these in order. Again, look for the transition words. First of all, we have the tarantula and the brown recluse are more different than they are similar. So they're going to give a compare and contrast pattern. How do we know? Because they use the word different and the word similar in the topic sentence. Then words they have both, alike, similarity, similarity, yet, contrast, while shows contrast. Take a look at this one. In the Middle Age, men and women often view life very differently, especially if they are couples who have led traditional lives. So men and women had different, so this is going to be all contrast. So here they're asking, is this same paragraph differently? Hold on, especially if they are couples who had led traditional lives. I still think this is contrast. I don't see any who have led traditional lives. I think it's contrast. Let's see if I'm right. Yes, I am right. It is contrasting. The next one, what two things are being contrasted? It would be men and women often view life very differently. So who views life differently? Men and women. Very good. Take a look here. What three contrast transition words or phrases are used in the paragraph? I'm just going to skim it quickly. In contrast, unlike, and I'm missing one unless they're going to talk about differently here. Let's see. Yes. So differently, in contrast, and unlike. These are all transition words that you would expect to see in a contrasting paragraph. Alright, so I don't really go over cause and effect in this class, but let's just go through it quickly. I just want you to know that they have transition words as well. So again, A and B, I would choose B because of the word because. Because the paint has worn off the wooden siding, fungus has begun to grow on it. Why has fungus begun to grow on it? Because the paint has worn. Cause and effect. And a good way I'd like to teach cause and effect is because of this was the effect. So I always tell my students to change the word cause to because. I think it helps. It's just my little way. Alright, here they're just going to tell us, there we go, because the paint, that's our cause and effect word. Common words for cause and effect, therefore, thus, as a consequence, reason, explanation, owing to. All these words you can use for a cause and effect. Because, as a result. Here's the cause and effect pattern. Maybe you have one cause, but then it has three different outcomes or effects. Or you can write it cause, 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 because of this, because of this, because of this, this all happened. This was the effect. These three causes caused one huge effect. The warm temperature waters, the winds, the weather change. What's the effect? A tornado or a hurricane in Florida. So that's one way of setting these up. So let's go through this paragraph and we'll break it apart as we go. Again, pause, read it, and I think they're going to ask you for the topic sentence, for some key words, etc. So here the following paragraph describes one effect that is supported by three causes. So this we're going to have cause, 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 and at the bottom will be the effect. So let me go to the next. So if we take a look here, even the best listeners are unable to listen carefully to everything they hear. So why can't they listen carefully? What's the effect? Not being able to hear carefully. What's the first reason, their cause? Overload of message. What's the second cause? Maybe they're thinking about other personal concerns. Maybe their boyfriend broke up with them or their girlfriend broke up with them. And then here, maybe there's just noise in the room. Maybe there's music or people listening. So because the message is too hard, because I have problems with my family, and because maybe there's noise or students talking, what was the effect? I was unable to listen carefully. So that's the way that paragraph goes. Alright, let's go to, so this is everything I just said, but they give it into a map here. Because message overload, because preoccupation, because blah blah blah, and this was the overall effect. And I really like to use, instead of cause, 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 the word because. So here are three common patterns you may see when you're reading. A definition, and then they give you examples. In class we've been writing illustration or exemplification, essays. You state something and then you list the reasons why. And you say, for example, for instance. And then in compare and contrast, you can compare, you can contrast, or you can do both. Ultimately, your thesis will tell the readers what you're going to write about. Compare, contrast, or both. And then cause and effect. You can have an effect with many causes, or you can have a cause with many effects. And remember, I like the word because. I went through this quickly. If you need to, pause, take notes. All right, everybody, good luck. Thank you.